Avengers Endgame is just a few days away, but I want to talk about what's going to happen after Avengers Endgame. And even though we don't have any confirmations about what the next MCU Phase 4 films are, with the exception of Spider-Man, as well as well, that one's actually been promoted, but we've also got Black Widow and the Eternals coming, and of course, Guardians 3 and Black Panther 2. We don't really know what the future is for the original core Avengers, except for Black Widow. And I want to talk about Thor 4, because Tessa Thompson was talking about Thor 4 recently, and actually Chris Hemsworth did too. And I want to talk about what I want to see from Thor 4. Now, if they do Thor 4, it would be the first MCU film that is the fourth in a lineup of like a series, with the exception of Avengers, but that's more of a crossover film. We've seen 3 Iron Man movies, 3 Captain America movies, 3 Thor movies. We will have 3 Guardians movies. Thor would be the first one to have 4. And the reason for that is, I mean, again, we don't know, as of right now, as of this video, I don't know if Thor survives Endgame, but I assume that he does, because they're already talking about Thor 4. But remember, Thor 4 could also be a prequel, because supposedly they are looking to do more prequels. Like the Black Widow film is supposed to be a prequel. And of course, Captain Marvel sort of is a prequel. It's tough to say if you even want to call it that, but it takes place prior to the current events. With Thor 4, though, it's interesting because, to my recollection or to my knowledge, Loki might not come back. And I feel like Loki's character has been such an integral part of the Thor films. It's almost like you can't really have a Thor movie without Loki. And I feel like the first Thor movie was kind of a basic film. The second one is my least favorite MCU movie of all. I can't stand that movie. But I love Thor Ragnarok, and Loki I thought was very delightful in that movie. But what can they do with Thor 4? Well, I want to, first of all, ask you guys to leave your comments and give me some ideas for Thor 4. But the first thing I'm going to say, which should be obvious if you're a fan of comic books, is I want Beta Ray Bill. That's what I want for Thor 4. And for those who don't know, Beta Ray Bill is an old Thor character. And the whole character of Beta Ray Bill is, from my recollection, kind of popular, but not really one that's ever been portrayed like in a major cinema or in a major story that we know of outside the comics. Beta Ray Bill is one of the few characters that's been able to wield Thor's hammer as well as Stormbreaker. He's actually used Stormbreaker at one time. Well, his version of Stormbreaker was different, but the thing about Beta Ray Bill is that he sort of has been in the past a bit of an anti-hero as well as a villain too. So he's kind of played both sides, and he's really popular. I don't really see why they haven't really done a storyline. I mean, there's so many storylines they could do with Beta Ray Bill. I mean, they could bring in Tyrant. They could do, oh God, there's so many things they've done in the past. They could do the comic book version of Ragnarok, except, maybe change the name for the theatrical version. They could introduce Alpha Ray into the storyline. They could do that. They could also incorporate some stuff from the Thanos Imperative storyline with the Nova Corps. Now that the MCU has tons of different characters from the Fantastic Four, I'm not saying they have to do it right away, but they could actually bring in Galactus and other characters to make the storylines more interesting. And as I make this video, I often wonder if people remember, I wonder if people remember the Silver Surfer cartoon from way back, and I wonder if they remember there was an episode of Beta Ray, or of Silver Surfer with Beta Ray Bill. So, I mean, they could do something there with that. And, of course, with the Silver Surfer being a part of that purchase from Fox, they could always do more things there. Now, another thing they can do is they can go all the way back to the early days of Thor and bring in some foes that we haven't seen in the theatrical films. Radioactive Man, not the one from The Simpsons, Mr. Hyde, the Cobra. There's tons of villains from the old days of Avengers that they could bring into the films. There's lots of stuff. They could even do the Pluto and Hercules. There's so many different characters. I mean, I think Hercules could work as well in the MCU. I think that character might get over. They could also do something with the Dark Elves again. Obviously, Malekith was killed in the second Thor movie, so I don't know if bringing him back is going to work. But again, there's another option there. I think that Beta Ray Bill, based on the fact that the fans love Beta Ray Bill, is probably the most likely as far as popularity goes for them to use it. And we know that Kevin Feige is a big fan of of Marvel, right? So he would know for sure what would work and what wouldn't work, and I feel like that would work. So who knows? Now, also there was this whole storyline in the comics where Avengers marries Amora the Enchantress and has a son named Magni. That could also work for a big Phase 4 movie, but I feel like if they do that, and I haven't actually read that entire story, so excuse me for my ignorance, but I feel like if they do that storyline, it might be a multiple film story, and it would have to require Chris Hemsworth to do more movies, because that's kind of a big deal if you ask me, if he has a child. But that's a more modern kind of storyline if they go that route. Now, as far as them using Loki, again, I have a feeling that they're going to find a way to bring him back, even if it's through flashbacks or some kind of prequel. Also, Odin, I feel, never really got to do or show how strong he actually is. For those who don't know, Odin in the comics is really, really powerful. Ridiculously powerful. And we never really got to see that in the Avengers films, or in the MCU, that is. Maybe they could do something with him. Of course, he died, quote unquote, in in Thor Ragnarok, but nobody's ever truly gone, like Luke said, so maybe he will come back. Now, there's another storyline that's a lot more recent that came out in 2011 called Fear Itself, where Odin's long-forgotten brother, the god of fear, the Serpent, is released. The Serpent could also be a villain they could bring into the Thor films. It is a more recent storyline, and I feel like Kevin Feige, although he does seem to take inspiration from the modern stuff a little bit, I do feel like he takes more inspiration from the older stuff more. Like, of course, Secret Wars has been heavily rumored. We have, of course, Infinity Gauntlet, and the Thanos Quest. A little bit of Infinity too. That you'd think that he would use storylines from back in the day, but if it's a good storyline, it's a good storyline, and they could, spoiler alert, I'm gonna spoil a comic book storyline. Thor dies in the Fear Itself story, so if they want to figure out a way to write Thor out, they could do something pretty easily here. But of course, he does come back from limbo, and we haven't even really seen limbo in these movies, and they could show us limbo. It has been rumored that limbo will be in Endgame, but again, they haven't shown us that yet, and they could do something like that again. They could easily do that. Now, as far as Jane Foster goes, she's always been kind of involved in Thor storylines, of course, but Natalie Portman does not seem to be interested in reprising her role. And to be honest with you, I'm not really sure I really want her to come back, only because even though I think she's a great actress, but I feel like in the second Thor movie, The Dark World, she was not very good at all. She was, it was a waste of Natalie Portman. I feel like she phoned it in. It just didn't seem like a great storyline at all. So I don't foresee Jane Foster coming back for Thor 4, but we do know, like I said, that Tessa Thompson, excuse me. I was gonna say Tessa Foster, but that's not right. Tessa Thompson already said that she wants to be involved, or she will be involved. There's been a pitch for Thor 4, and Valkyrie was a pretty cool character. Of course, they're gonna have Korg come back, because the director for Thor Ragnarok is probably gonna come back and do Thor 4, and it'll probably be a comedic storyline. It'll probably be more like Thor Ragnarok than the older Thor movies. I don't really see the Thor movies going back to how they used to be. I think having Thor be kind of a little funny, but also a lot of action can work. Also, let's not forget, one of my favorite characters in the MCU, and really I like his MCU performance a lot, I would say, is the Grandmaster. And I think the Grandmaster, portrayed by Jeff Goldblum, would be a fantastic addition to the Thor 4, because I thought he was one of my favorite parts of Thor Ragnarok, one of the Elders of the Universe, and I really, really want them to do a Grandmaster storyline where he and the Collector, who are related, do something. It doesn't have to be in Thor Ragnarok. It could be in Guardians 3 or really whatever they want to do. But I think the idea, the concept of having him come back is great, mostly because I am a big Jeff Goldblum fan. He's so insanely powerful and yet doesn't care about anything. And I love the Grandmaster in these films. I love him, and I do hope that it hasn't been confirmed yet, but I do hope that if Taika Waititi, I can never pronounce his name, the guy who directed Thor 3, does come back. I think he will come back for Thor 4. I think it could be another great film. I think it could be a lot of fun. Maybe they'll do a crossover with Doctor Strange. I mean, he did make a cameo in Ragnarok, and I really like the chemistry with Chris Hemsworth and Benedict Cumberbatch, and I think that could also be a treat to see on the screen. So, yeah, what do you think about Thor 4? What other storylines could they do for Thor 4 to make it interesting? Let me know. I'm curious to see what you think. And again, my number one pick is still Better Ray Bill. That is my number one. So if you agree, let me know. And if not, let me know what other ideas you have. Love you guys. I'll see you next time.